Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
A diesel-powered engine on a farm works hard and operates in a grueling environment. Soy biodiesel fuels stand up to the challenge of powering farm equipment, but are also renewable and environmentally responsible as well. The Nebraska Soybean Board is committed to encouraging the use of soy biodiesel to protect the environment and sustain Nebraska's agriculture. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Market Journal, television for making agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Jeff Peterson looks at corn and soybean markets. Stephen Baenziger talks with us at the wheat variety trials in Sydney about the disparity in Nebraska's wheat crop. Karla Jenkins discusses options for feeding cows in confinement. And Bob Wright advises producers on how to scout for Japanese beetles. The USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service says it'll collect updated information on 2013 soybean planting acres. When NASS obtained its original survey during the first 2 weeks of June, big chunks of land remain unplanted due to weather. NASS will now ask producers in 14 states, including Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota, for updated information. Nebraska is not part of the resurvey. The USDA is currently estimating a record 77.7 million soybean acres. NASS says if the new data requires a change, it'll release new projections in the crop production report on August 12th. Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners is our marketing analyst this week. The latest crop conditions show 67% of both U.S. corn and soybeans in good to excellent condition. That's 19 points above the same time last year for corn and 22 points better in soybeans. Jeff joined us Wednesday afternoon to look at how markets moved this week after the recent acreage and stocks reports.
Ever since the report came out, everybody's sitting back in a little bit of disbelief on the acre numbers, and everybody's always questioning that. So I think the markets went into this holiday time frame here really pretty quiet and probably about what we'd expected after the numbers we ended up seeing.
Let's start in the stocks, and we'll look at both corn and soybeans. In corn, the number is 2.76 billion bushels. That was actually on the low end of the guess, but if you look at that number, is that something that you feel safe with?
Yeah, you know it is. We feel comfortable with that number. We were thinking they might come in a little bit bigger, so I'm glad they actually came in smaller. But the most important thing in the way we take away that number and go forward is that we look at that and say, are we on course to hit USDA's carryout number of 769? And we do believe we are as we take into account exports, ethanol, and also the feed and the residual.
So when that next quarterly number comes out, you don't expect there to be a huge shock to the market?
I don't. It's not going to be an easy task. The thing we have to remember is when that next stock number comes out, that's on September 1st. There's not going to be much corn ready come September 1st. So we're still going to have to get through 20 days in September on these old crop stocks.
In soybeans, 435 million bushels. That's such a small number, and it's a big drop from where it was a year ago. Do you think that's safe, or is that an area where demand might have to be rationed again?
Yeah, I think you're right, Jeff. Demand is going to have to be rationed. As we study the numbers and look at what USDA has forecasted, we do believe there does have to be some rationing. Probably some of the hardest rationing will be over on the crush side. That probably needs to be reduced about 30 million bushels, and we'll also need to see some of the exports washed out yet in order for us to come in at 125.
You do think that's an opportunity?
I do, yeah.
Ethanol really has put in some strong margins lately, but now the latest report shows that production dropped, but at the same time, the stocks are incredibly low. So what's happening in that sector really to kind of diagnose going forward?
Yeah, I think the ethanol, that's one of those areas we want to watch closely. The margins have pulled back, but what has kind of quietly happened, we've got crude oil back over 100 now. And so as a result of that, we could see the margins come back higher. Ethanol is one of the areas of demand that we may need to see USDA go ahead and increase yet again in future reports, because the demand has been very strong there. And as a result of those tight stocks, those margins are still looking good enough to keep them running at the levels they're at.
Today, as we talk, we're after the close on Wednesday, and today was really not a bad day. But if you didn't get anything sold, if you were trying to play the other side of this before those reports came out on Friday, and you still have some left in corn and beans, old crop, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, my recommendation is not to panic here. I would say right now, go ahead and look for a bounce, sell into that. You should get a chance to probably sell some new, old crop beans up somewhere closer, upper 15s to 16, because we do have some demand rationing. And on the old crop, I think we're going to find some pretty good support in that cash area, 7 or above. I just look for a spike higher to make a sale. Don't make a panic sale here.
Basis numbers are doing what right now?
Well, basis, after we've made the roll, we've kind of got a little confusion out there in the market. You've got the July in delivery.
Right.
You've got people rolling their basis. I think we'll see some higher basis numbers yet. That isn't reflected today, but we will see some higher ones yet on corn and beans.
If you're trying to find some money in the 2013 crop and haven't sold a very big percentage, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, my recommendation right now in the 2013 is on this next bounce higher, I would go ahead and be a seller. And I would be a seller on bushels that ultimately you'd be comfortable getting up to, maybe your crop insurance level, but be ready to defend that. Just in case we'd see a weather scare or something happen down the road, be ready to come back and put some calls against that, just in case something else happens.
Didn't hear too much talk this week, or excuse me, this year. Last year there was some talk about putting in some short season hybrid corns to try and get a jump on that market, but really there hasn't been an option for that because of the planting situation this year.
No, there hasn't been, but I think that same opportunity is still there, Jeff. One thing I would look for, think about some of your short season beans, think about some of your short season corn, think about where that's at and what market you could go to, because there'll be some very good basis levels for that when the time comes.
2014 numbers sort of took it on the chin last week. 2014, is that an opportunity you see you might be able to gain some money in?
I think at some point in here, I wouldn't want to be a seller right here today, but on the next bounce I would want to be. One of the things we really want to think about is that the market has been needing additional acres, probably for the last 3 years, and that's always given us some good opportunities after the first of the year. This year it's probably going to be a little different. We probably aren't quite going to need as many acres, so I'm not so convinced we'll see some of the pricing opportunities next year that we've seen this past year, by no means.
NASS is going to resurvey producers for their bean numbers in 14 states. Nebraska is not one of them. It's those states that had trouble getting those beans in the ground. Perhaps the important thing to remember is the numbers are a human number, so August 12th rolls around, what you might see.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, if anything, our feeling, even before thinking about resurveying, I do think we have to be prepared to see that soybean number go higher. But at the same time, I think sometime down the road, we will have to look for a lower corn number. I don't know if it's much lower, but it will be lower down the road.
The USDA is scheduled to release the July World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And next week, we'll look at livestock markets with UNL Extension economist Kate Brooks. The nation's second biggest pork-producing state has recorded its first cases of the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. North Carolina discovered PEDV on 2 hog farms last week, according to a Reuters report. The American Association of Swine Veterinarians' new update shows 265 positive tests for the virus across the country. The addition of North Carolina would put the tally for PEDV positive states at 13. That doesn't include Nebraska, but 5 of the 6 states bordering Nebraska have at least one confirmed case of the virus. Wyoming is the only exception. A confirmed PEDV test in North Carolina would make it the only current state to have the virus while not sharing a border with any other positive state. To see biosecurity precautions to help prevent spread of the virus, you can look at our interviews with Nebraska State Veterinarian Dennis Hughes and Kansas State University veterinarian Steve Dritz from the May 24th episode of Market Journal. Exactly half of Nebraska's winter wheat crop is in poor or very poor condition. 33% is in fair, 16% is rated as good, which leaves only 1% of this year's crop in excellent shape. That fits the mold, as 42% of U.S. winter wheat is in the worst 2 categories. Nebraska, which hasn't started harvest yet, usually has a good jump by this time of the year. The 5-year average shows completion at 15%. At the Wheat Variety Tour last week in Sydney, we talked with Stephen Baenziger about seed supply after this drought, selecting the right variety, and how Nebraska's winter wheat crop looks from east to west.
First of all, what you need to know, in Nebraska, historically, there are 3 major ecogeographical regions. One is the east, one is the southwest district, and one is the panhandle, or the west district. Sydney is in the panhandle district. Okay. This year, the wheat in the panhandle looks remarkably good for as dry as it's been. I think we're going to do fairly well. The real drought was in the Southwest District, and parts of that were disastrous, and parts of it are below average, okay? And in the East, we've had a lot of moisture since the first of the year, and so that wheat looks phenomenal other than the diseases coming in.
Any areas where abandonment is a definite possibility?
Well, there's certainly abandonment going on in the Southwest District, and there's even some abandonment going on in the Panhandle. And the reason for that is the rains always are spotty, and so if you missed a few rains, it's the difference between having a wheat crop and not.
Overall, as you look at the U.S. wheat crop, or I guess in the Midwest, what do years like this do to the seed supply and the difficulty that growers face in finding that for the next year?
Well, the seed supply is huge because if you think about it, in Nebraska, we've got pretty good seed supply. First of all, we have a tremendous amount of certified seed being sold. We think over half our crop now is being planted to certified seed. That's huge for the Great Plains. When I first came here, some states were 3% certified seed planted, so 97% was farmer safe. But the main thing is it's very rare when you have 3 ecological zones that you lose your crop everywhere. So quite often Nebraska, and in part because we're the #1 irrigated state, we're the ones that can produce seed when nobody else can. So Texas had terrible freezes. That's ruined their seed. Oklahoma's had a lot of freezes. That's certainly harmed their seed. They say that the drought in Colorado, which then extends into southwestern Nebraska, has damaged the seed lot there too. So the southern Great Plains are desperate for seed, and we understand also that the north, South Dakota's had difficulty with drought too. So we think seed will be an extremely short supply in the Great Plains, and that the people who do have seed will be able to sell it, all of it, and the people who need seed should be buying it early.
Do years like this make a difference in your decision-making process in the future as to what varieties you choose to go after, or how much more difficult does that selection become?
It works both ways. You should always use every year to learn from. Last year was probably the more extreme year. This year is sort of a more, it's atypical, but it's not unusual. Last year was the earliest year in history since I came here. It was 2 weeks earlier than anything we had previously. So it was massively early. At the same time, we learned something about wheats. You know, wheats that do well there and then did well the previous year, which was a more normal year, and then do very well this year, which is a little bit abnormal, boy, that wheat will be able to do well in almost any year. So you can learn quite a bit. What you have to watch for are the wheats that are not so broadly adapted or not so flexible that in an average year will still do very, very well. That you don't want to throw away.
I'll ask you a very broad question here to close out with. What are the major advancements that have been made in seed and in their yield, and what needs to be done going forward?
Well, the major advancement in seed has probably been the yield. I mean, you know, that's been what we can do now. Well, you know, basically, if you looked in the trials at Scout 66, that's probably 20 bushels off the pace of what our modern wheats can do. So we've made tremendous advantages that way. We've also made tremendous advantages in diseases. Now, there's still diseases we have to work on. Stripe rust, leaf rust change periodically. Stem rust, not so much. We still need to do better on our viruses. Barley yellow dwarf is one that's been very difficult to work with. We finally have wheat streak mosaic virus under control, and we need to do that in many, many more types of things. So there's a lot of things we can do there. The wheat stem sawfly is coming into western Nebraska. We'll need to start creating lines that are resistant to that because, to the best of our knowledge, there is no insecticide that'll work well for that. So we just have a lot of things that keep, you know, changing and making differences and those types of things.
And we talked about wheat stem sawfly last week with Jeff Bradshaw. You can see that interview on the Market Journal website and our mobile app. The latest UNL drought monitor shows nearly 92% of Nebraska remains in some form of drought, with the severest forms in the western half of the state. Last week at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center in Scottsbluff, we talked with Karla Jenkins about why farmers and ranchers may be forced to feed cattle in confinement because of back-to-back dry years.
Of course, last year we had a horrendous drought with extreme temperatures, and so that put us in a major soil water deficit going into this year. This year, on average, across the state, we're still only at 60, 70, 80% of the moisture rainfall that we would normally have by this time of year. So that, combined with the deficit of last year, has reduced grass growth tremendously. So we're short on grass. Even if we had had the rainfall that we should have had, we still would have needed to delay turnout and reduce stalking rates to get that grass some recovery time. And so as a result, we're having to delay some pastures to where they have no turnout at all. Stocking rates have had to be reduced 30 to 50%. So what cows weren't sold due to drought had to go somewhere, and so that's why a lot of cows ended up in confinement feeding situations, even through lactation with the baby.
Even with feed prices, what are the other challenges that go with that?
Feed prices are high, but grass is not available. I mean, if the grass does not grow, there you can't make it. And so we have pasture shortages. The drought last year was so widespread across the Midwest that it makes it difficult to move cows to places where there is grass. Most of the area in the United States that is what we would typically consider our cow-calf country was hit by this drought. So where in some years when we would have a drought in, say, Nebraska, we might be able to move cows to graze in South Dakota, and this year that's been very challenging because most of that area was hit as well.
What are you using in this diet? How does the diet change once you move them into the feedlot? What are some things that come into play?
We have been able to use crop residues such as corn stalks, corn stover, or wheat straw mixed with byproducts such as distillers grains and beet pulp. Out here in the West, we were able to mix some beet pulp in the diet, cheapen the diet up, but meet the energy needs. Currently, these cows on this particular study are on a dry matter basis on 40% distillers, 40% silage, and 20% wheat straw.
What's the supplementation, if there's any at all?
Well, they get trace minerals and some calcium supplement to go with that. The phosphorus comes in the distillers.
With your study, are they in the dry lot for the entirety of the summer, do you expect?
In the study, in this particular study, these cows spend their entire production cycle 12 months out of the year in confinement so that we can see how that plays out for producers so we can help them decide which segments they might want to have their cows in confinement if that's what it comes to.
What are the expectations on performance in these situations?
So far, these cows have done extremely well. The cows are in 5 and 6 condition score, which is moderate to very good. What we've found is we can feed these residues, we can feed these byproducts. As long as we're meeting the energy requirements of those cows, they do just fine. So we can limit the amount of dry matter that they're fed, so that reduces the cost of the ration, but we're not limiting the energy. And so if we balance that diet, even if it has byproducts and residues in it, as long as the energy is met, those cows maintain their weight very well.
Have you been able to use any silage out here? Was there any available? Eastern part of the state's maybe a little different story, but what about here?
We do put up some silage out here in western Nebraska, and it is a comparable energy source. I mean, it's good. It works well for the cows, and from a cost on an energy basis, then it's a pretty good source. So we have included some silage in these diets to maybe help the calf grow a little better than just a straight residue and distiller's diet, since these calves are going to spend a good chunk of their lives in confinement on the same diet that the cow is on.
Karla's recent webinar on using crop residues to limit feed cows in confinement can be found on the Beef website. We'll also link to it on the Market Journal homepage if you're interested in finding more information. It's the web version of a family farm reality show. The Bartok family of Anselmo is featured in Growing Season, a year-long documentary about their crop and livestock operation. You can read about the series and the family in July's Nebraska Farmer. Cooperative Producers Inc., a Hastings-based cooperative, is sponsoring the weekly series and says the goal is to get a better grasp of the different challenges each farmer faces. You can see the episodes online at itsgrowingseason.com and read more about the series in the July Nebraska Farmer. Several UNL Extension educators in eastern Nebraska have reported the presence of Japanese beetles. The insect can affect both corn and soybeans, but as Bob Wright said when we talked earlier this week, it's important you positively identify the Japanese beetle before you think about treating.
It's a type of June beetle that's not a native Nebraskan insect. It's obviously imported from or introduced from Asia. It's been on the East Coast for a long time and has been moving into Nebraska the last 20 or 30 years, where we've seen populations in the towns around Omaha and Lincoln in the last 5 or 6 years. It's been showing up more in crop fields. And we've been recently getting some reports of either it or closely related species in soybeans and corn, and a lot of confusion about which beetle is which.
What's the differentiation there? What are you looking for on the insect to see if it's actually the Japanese beetle?
Okay, the Japanese beetle has a bright metallic green head and thorax or middle segment, and it also has some white tufts of hair on the side, 5 tufts of hair. The other beetle we're seeing is found throughout the state and is less damaging than the Japanese beetle. Some people call it the false Japanese beetle or the sand chafer because it's mostly in sandy soil areas like the Platte River Valley. It does not have any metallic green. It's about the same size, about a 1/2 inch long. It can vary a lot in color. It's usually sort of a light tan color, but it can also be dark brown or orange. It often, we see it sometimes, it gets attracted to people. It'll land on people with light colored clothes in the field.
The Japanese beetle this is?
No, this is the false
beetle.
Japanese beetle. And people are confusing it with the Japanese beetle. It's a lot less economic damaging than the Japanese beetle. So we don't want people treating for these false Japanese beetles if they don't have Japanese beetles in the area.
What damage or what kind of damage would the Japanese beetle itself cause to the soybean plant?
It just feeds on the leaves, and typically damage in both corn and soybeans is heaviest on the field borders. So if you can check field borders and catch them as they're moving into fields, maybe you can just spray the field border and not have to spray the whole field. Right now in soybeans in vegetative stages, we can stand up to 40% defoliation. And as we get into reproductive stages, we can stand about 20% defoliation before you need to treat. And so a lot of fields we're seeing Japanese beetles in soybeans, but I don't think we're not at economic levels in a lot of cases. Later on in corn, the Japanese beetles can feed on the silks, just like corn rootworms do, but they're a lot bigger than rootworms. And again, field borders are typically damaged more than the center of the field. So that's something to watch for later in areas that have had Japanese beetles. I know we've had some populations the last couple of years in Saline County and Hamilton County in damaging hotspots in corn and soybeans, but it's not very widespread, but it's showing up more often in eastern Nebraska.
Just treating with a common insecticide?
Yeah, any of the pyrethroids or organophosphate insecticides would be good, so they're not particularly hard to kill once you find them.
Bob also says this is the time when producers can be scouting for corn rootworm larvae. His recent CropWatch article details tips on how to scout fields and options for treatment. We'll link to that on our website. Now with this week's weather forecast, here's UNL Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast. I hope that you did have a safe and relaxing 4th of July. During this past week, really we just had a scattering of showers across the state. No significant moisture to speak of, and that has been a trend that started to develop recently, and we hope that it doesn't continue into the future. During the last 30 days, about 80% of the state has failed to receive at least 70% of normal precipitation. The only areas that were showing above normal moisture in this 30-day period are isolated pockets of the Panhandle, particularly around the Scottsbluff, Alliance, and Chadron area. And then in eastern Nebraska, the area between Omaha and just to the east of Columbus has also shown a defined trend for above normal moisture, but everybody else has been missing out recently on precipitation. And this is important because as we look at the NASS statistics, the Agricultural Statistics Service is indicating that as of the last day of June, no, and let me repeat, no % of the corn crop had reached either the tasseling or silk stage. Last year at this time, 22% of the crop had reached the tassel or the silking stage, and the 5-year average is around 5%. And based on all model projections in terms of temperatures, if we assume normal going forward, we're looking at the majority of the crop coming into pollination between the 15th and the 22nd of the month. So moisture is very critical now. We don't want to be running out before pollination. So let's take a look at the upper models and see if we have anything of any significance in the forecast. And I'll draw your attention, last week we talked about the possibility of this trough kind of sitting around the eastern and central corn belt, bringing in some cooler air. Well, that's held to place. It was a little bit stronger than normal, but we are starting to try to see that ridge and that heat from the southwest starting to move eastward. I don't think it's going to quite make it to eastern Nebraska, but certainly western Nebraska is going to see some pretty significant warmth over this weekend. Now as we go go into tomorrow, we'll see that ridge starts to expand. So I expect that everybody in the state will probably be well into the 90s, and as we get into the southwest part of the state, triple digits looks to be in the cards. As we go into the day on Monday, we'll see that where the ridge starts to flatten out on the top, most of the energy stays to our north, so anything that we do generate in terms of isolated thunderstorms is likely to be well to our north or along the northern Nebraska border, and some isolated pockets out in the sand hills and to the western portion of the state. Now on Tuesday, this represents probably our best opportunity for precipitation across the state as we see a trough trying to dig its way into the central corn belt. Most of the energy stays in the Dakotas, but it does look like if there's any heavy precipitation, it'll be in northeastern Nebraska with lesser totals the farther west and south that you head from this region. As we get into the day on Wednesday, we'll see that trough still remains in place. So in the southwestern part of the state, we hit the hotter temperatures, the northeast the cooler temperatures, with some isolated thunderstorms possible. Now as we get into the day Thursday, the ridge starts to build back in. We start to push that cooler conditions back toward the Great Lakes. And the day on Thursday, the ridge and the heat starts to build into our region. So as we look at the forecast, we are looking at temperatures primarily in the 100-degree range in the southwest, cooling down into the 90s in the southwest. In the east, we're looking at 95-degree temperatures cooling down to the 80s with scattered thunderstorm activity. 8 to 14-day forecast keeps the cool temperatures in place. In terms of precipitation, are shown above normal precipitation, but with that ridge in place, I think this is way overdone.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews, which include market analysis with Jeff Peterson, a look at Nebraska's wheat condition with Stephen Baenziger, feeding cows in confinement with Karla Jenkins, and scouting for Japanese beetle with Bob Wright, are available as part of the July 5th episode of Market Journal on our website and through the Market Journal mobile app for smartphones and tablets. You can also connect with Market Journal throughout the week with updates sent directly to your email inbox. You can visit our website at marketjournal.unl.edu to learn more or to subscribe. Next week, Rick Rasby will discuss early weaning of calves. We'll take a look at the July WASDE report, and Kate Brooks will be our livestock marketing analyst. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension, where you can know how, know now. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Soybeans are found on dinner tables around the world. Some form of the soybean is found in baby foods, snacks, cooking oils, and many other food items eaten daily. And soybeans provide the protein in the diets for livestock and fish. The Nebraska soybean farmers support research to develop new soy-based products for foods, livestock, and industrial uses through their checkoff dollars. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.